Hey guys, Caleb here with DSLRvideoshooter.com, and today we are going to be doing a review of the Photography and Cinema Prime Video Shoulder Rig. This is a fantastic shoulder rig, and you'll notice I actually don't have it set up with what comes out of the box. And the reason for that is I'm showing you the primary party piece of this shoulder rig, and that's that this is one of the best shoulder rigs to purchase because you're going to be able to grow with it, or it's going to really be able to grow with you. And that's what I love about this thing, is you can pimp it out like this. You can add all kinds of customized stuff like the matte box or a cage with a top handle, and or just use it with what you get out of the box. So that's what's great, is you purchase this thing straight out of the box, you have a fully operational shoulder rig, but as you grow and as you get more gear and acquire different bits and pieces, it's going to grow with you and you're still going to be able to use all of this stuff. So to start off, this is how I have it set up. Obviously, you'll notice the things I've added that aren't included with the original kit is the matte box. This is also sold by Photography and Cinema, also by Camera. The wooden camera cage. I'm using right now the wooden camera base plate, but you could also use the one that comes with the actual kit. So this is a little different than the, even when you take the camera off and the matte box, this is still a little different than how the original shoulder rig is configured. You'll notice that right off of the original two rails, I'm using their Z bracket. And instead of having two smaller rods coming off of this thing to hold the handles, I'm just using one. And then I'm using these 90-degree adapters for the handles, all on one rod. So you can see if I lift it up like this, there's just this one rod here. There's not two attached. And the reason for that is kind of two things. One, I'm trying to keep this as light as possible so I could stay set up like this. Normally I would have a monitor right here or down low like this. But I have that on my camera right now for filming this. But yeah, so I have the two handles coming off of one rod. It keeps it nice and tight. My arms are right at my sides. So I don't like having them all the way, out or really wide. So this keeps everything nice and compact. The other thing you'll notice is on the actual shoulder mount, instead of having it coming off the back, I have it going forward. And this allows me to do two things. One, it gets the camera almost directly over my shoulder. Because I don't have a counterweight set up, this is really going to keep the weight as far back as possible, so that if I do a profile here, you'll notice that there's really not that much weight out in front of me. So it really helps keep that together. The other reason is I can use this in two different ways. I can use it like it is right now, and then I can actually take and move the shoulder pad like so, and kind of bring the whole camera down and in front of me. So there's two ways to kind of have that set up. That's what I love about this. And I don't tighten down this thing, the shoulder pad. You can get this sucker super tight so it doesn't move at all. I like to have it like this so that I can, like I said, quickly go back and forth between the two setups. And the other reason is, let's say I'm on shoulder like this and I decide I want to go to my tripod. I simply pick up the camera, move this, and now my quick release plate is accessible so that I could drop this down and slide it forward. The other reason I really like this particular setup is, again, because it's super light, I can add things and subtract things. So as an example, I could loosen this up and pull off these handles and just set this in a bag somewhere. And now I have a nice, very minimal kind of a studio setup. And again, this really isn't that heavy. Even with the cage, the rods, and the matte box, this isn't terribly heavy. So I could do something more like this, get some B-roll or something. And this is how I would use it on a tripod. I just drop this down, slide it in, and I have a nice compact, very, very easy to use setup. So now what we're going to do is we're going to look at all the parts and components that come with the rig. Then I'm going to talk about the pros and cons, and then we're going to look at some different configurations that you can have out of the box. When it comes to the parts, you have a ton of stuff, and they actually give you more than you would use in one finished rig. So you have lots and lots of flexibility. You can do so many configurations, more than I could possibly show you in this video. But let's go over the parts first. The first thing is the shoulder pad. This attaches with two 15mm rods. It is flexible, and you can obviously see it's angled, so you can adjust it. If you use it in one particular setup, you can tighten it down and lock it there. I found that you can get it somewhat tight and you can still adjust it like I showed you earlier. It's very comfortable, has a nice thick foam. So that's the first thing, is the shoulder pad. The next thing is all of the rods. You are given two 12-inch aluminum rods, and then you are also given two shorter 6-inch rods like this one right here in the center on this particular setup. And that gives you a lot of flexibility. All of the rods have female threaded on the inside of the rod, so that lets you add the next set of rods, which are two of these guys. These are called Swiss rods. These are really cool. It's essentially a 8-inch rod, a female thread on one end of the rod and a male thread on the other end of the rod. So you could attach this to one of the other rod setups or the handles, which we're going to talk about in a second. And what's really cool about this is right in the middle of the rod, obviously you see this giant section here. This has multiple attachment points. The next thing that comes with the rig is this guy right here, which I have in the middle, and that is the Z offset piece. All it is two pairs of female 15mm attachment points. Really, this is primarily used to run off of your main set of rods and then have another set, which is where you're going to have either your camera, if you have the camera out in front of you, or your handles, which is how I have it set up. The next piece is the handles, and these are just 15mm rods with handles at the bottom. These are nice foam ones. This is probably the thing I don't like the most about this rig, is they kind of feel flimsy and cheap, and I don't know how the foam is going to hold up, but they're pretty great. They're long enough. They're not super, super long, but at the same time, they're not stubby short handles. So that's really nice, and they're very comfortable. And then the next piece is two of these 90-degree angle 15mm rod adapters. These are primarily used so that you can adapt from your horizontal 15mm rod over to your handles like you see here. What's great about these as well is that you have a 1/4-20 in the center of them. This is fantastic for mounting off a monitor like I do, or really anything else. And finally, and definitely not least important, is the camera base plate. This thing is incredible. When you consider how many different points of adjustment you have on this, it's amazing to me that they're selling this for around 50 bucks. So this comes with the full rig, and you have tons of ways to adjust your camera. Obviously you have a 1/4-20 right in the middle. This thing is completely metal. This allows you to have the camera mounted and you have a little bit of flexibility, so you can move the camera forward and back. Then you'll notice there's a bumper on the front of that, and that allows you to push this right up against your SLR, so there's no twisting going on, which is awesome. And then the next point of adjustment is two little Allen screws here that allow you to adjust the height. So this is going to be able to help you raise your camera up if you need to match a matte box. And then finally, on the bottom of the plate, this is where you would attach it to a tripod or a quick release plate for your tripod. That's all the different pieces of the whole kit. Here's an image with everything included. Obviously there's a lot of stuff, and you can really make a lot of things out of this kit. Now I want to talk about some of the things I didn't like about the rig. The first thing is these knobs. They are kind of difficult to adjust, and I noticed even when you tighten them all the way down, you can still flex. This is mainly noticeable on the handles. You can, really adjust them unless you grab these suckers and crank them down. Luckily, they do have access to the Allen wrench, so you can take an Allen key and really crank these down, but then you're not going to be able to adjust them by hand. The second thing is all of the 15mm adapter points. Some of them start to get too tight over time. So as a good example, this Z-arm or offset adapter, you'll notice there's a thin slit right here where the screw goes in, and as you screw it in, it tightens that down, which in turn tightens down on the 15mm rod points. I've noticed that over time, as this has been tight, when you loosen it up, it's still really hard to get the rods out, even though it's fully loose. There is a solution to this. You can loosen it all the way up and just take a screwdriver and stick it in that slot and then rotate it to try to separate that slot a little bit. So just something to think about, and you might run into down the road. So here's kind of the first configuration. It's a very basic configuration, and you just have the longer set of rods with your camera adapter, your shoulder pad, and again, I use it facing forward. I think that's more comfortable and easier to use. And then I have the offset with the two smaller rods, then the 90-degree adapters, then the handles. So this is another configuration. It's almost identical to the last one. The only difference is that we switched the camera from right on our shoulder to offset. And all it is using the same offset bracket and putting the shorter rods on the back and then the longer ones on the front. So it's a reverse of the last setup. This is going to really work well for people that have a camera setup where they don't have a monitor or an electronic viewfinder. So that's the second. Now let's move on to the third configuration. And here's our final configuration. This is a very, very minimal setup. All it is the longer rod attached from the shoulder pad to the camera base plate, and then I have a smaller rod going out to a handle. So if you look, I have them offset. So this is offset, rod, camera offset, handle offset. And this lets you use the camera as a handle and the actual handle together. And depending on your human anatomy, you might be able to get it set up where the camera and your LCD loop line up with your eye. This is a little low for me, so I would probably put a battery grip on here, raise it up a little bit, and then I'd be able to have it, something like that. Another thing you could do is if you want to strip it down even more, just loosen this up, get rid of your handle, and then tighten this down so it isn't flopping around. Now you have a very, very compact setup, very nice and small. You can see how quickly this could be thrown into a bag. You have your hand free for working with your lens and then your other hand on the camera. So all these configurations off of one shoulder kit, and what's so great is the cost. This whole thing costs only $260. So I highly recommend it. The few things I didn't like are easily outweighed by how flexible this setup is. Hats off to the guys at Photography and Cinema for coming up with something this high quality at the cost that they're introducing it at. Really like this, and you'll find links to this as well as some other photos on DSLRvideoshooter.com. And stay tuned for more tutorials and reviews over there. See you guys next time.